From the Pep Radio Newsroom, these are the stories we are covering at this hour. Senator Tammy Baldwin on Monday led a group of Democratic senators in proposing an amendment to the 2025 National Defense Authorization Act, which would remove a restriction on transgender procedures for minors. The House passed its version of the bill last week, which contains a section preventing the health care program used by service members and their families from covering treatments that could result in sterilization for individuals under 18. Representative Adam Smith, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, had called on House Speaker Mike Johnson this month to abandon the measure over the language. With the legislation now in the Senate, 21 Democratic senators wrote in a press release their amendment is necessary to allow military families the right to make their own decisions. Let's be clear. We're talking about parents who are in uniform serving our country who have earned the right to make the best decisions for their families, Senator Baldwin wrote. I trust our service members and their doctors to make the best healthcare decisions for their kids, not politicians. Backing the measure were Senators John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, and Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts. And now this news from Nairobi, Kenya. The housemate of an LGBTQ plus activist in Kenya sentenced to 50 years in prison on Monday for the murder of Edwin Chiloba, whose mutilated body was discovered in a metal box almost 2 years ago. The High Court sitting in Eldoret found Jackton Odhiambo guilty in the January 2023 killing that drew global attention to attitudes toward gay rights in largely conservative Kenya, where President William Ruto has called gay rights a non-issue and sex between men is illegal. Chiloba had been widely known in Kenya's LGBTQ plus community for his activism against discrimination. Odhiambo denied killing his housemate, despite samples of his DNA being found on the victim's body. He can appeal the sentencing. DNA evidence indicated the two men had an intimate physical relationship, and the court gave no finding on the motive for the killing. During the trial, witnesses testified about hearing the housemates in an argument and seeing Odhiambo later move the metal box. Justice Reuben Nyakundi said during the ruling that Odhiambo had planned the murder, waiting until the two returned home from a nightclub. Chiloba had marks on his hands showing that he tried to fight back, Nyakundi said. LGBTQ plus people have decried discrimination and attacks in Kenya, but police ruled out the possibility that the killing was a hate crime. And finally, this news from Kentucky. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear says he does not believe transgender inmates in the state's prison system should be provided with gender-affirming surgeries funded by tax dollars. During a December 12th press conference, Beshear was asked to comment on the transition treatments being done in the state's prisons after Kentucky Republicans blasted a recent draft regulation from the state's Department of Corrections concerning policies and procedures related to the treatment of incarcerated individuals. I recognize that LGBTQ inmates may be at higher risk for violence than other inmates, Beshear said. However, convicted felons do not have the right to have any and all medical surgeries paid for entirely by tax dollars, especially when it would exceed the type of coverage available to law-abiding citizens in the private sector. Beshear noted that many of the practices in the draft regulation are required under the Federal Prison Rape Elimination Act. As The Hill reported, clarifications to the Kentucky Department of Corrections' own regulations made in recent years also state that trans inmates should receive access to gender-affirming surgeries after all other avenues to alleviate their gender dysphoria have been attempted. Earlier this month, the department sent a letter to Kentucky Attorney General Russell Coleman seeking clarification on those regulations. At last Thursday's press conference, Beshear said that he does not support all of what is in the draft regulation and that it has been pulled for review. He also echoed concerns in the Corrections Department letter to Coleman, citing conflicting circuit court decisions around the country as to whether state prison systems are from For more information about this story or any of the other stories that we've covered, please check out the PEP Radio channel on YouTube. There should be an entire listing of all the newscasts, weather forecasts, and news blasts that we have provided. So be sure to go over to YouTube, check it out, and hit that subscribe button so that you can follow along on a daily basis. And also be sure to download the Live 365 app so you can take PEP Radio with you wherever you go. And now, back to more music on PEP Radio.